Have you ever wondered what kind of species chooses to feel pain when the universe offers them escape? Most erase suffering. Most silence the ache. But humans listen to it. They build from it. Virex Prime was perfect once. White towers, flawless logic, 4 millennia without a scream. Then came the war. And then came her. Captain Elaine Harper, wounded, limping, breathing through pain she refused to heal. When the alien general asked, "Do you feel pain on purpose?" she smiled. And in that moment, something ancient inside him cracked. Because what terrified the Dravari Empire wasn't her strength. It was the question her existence forced them to ask. If pain is weakness, why do the broken always rise first? Maybe that's what humanity truly is. Not a species built to conquer, but a species built to endure, until endurance itself becomes meaning. Before we begin, subscribe, like, and tell me from which city or planet you're watching this. This story explores one of humanity's greatest paradoxes: why meaning matters more than survival. General Kyren Thal had seen 10,000 species across 400 years of existence. He had witnessed civilizations rise and collapse, watched empires burn and reform, cataloged the death throes of stars. But nothing in his vast experience had prepared him for the human sitting across from him in his laboratory. Captain Elaine Harper limped into the white cathedral suspended over Virex Prime's electric ocean, her right leg dragging slightly. The guards had offered medical assistance. She had refused. Blood seeped through makeshift bandages on her arms, wounds from the extraction 3 days prior when Dravari soldiers had pulled her from the wreckage of the USS Kepler. She should have been screaming, should have been begging for relief. Instead, she smiled. Karen felt something unfamiliar crawl beneath his genetically perfected skin. Not quite disgust, not quite fascination. The Dravari language had no word for it, because his species had eliminated such uncomfortable sensations 43,000 years ago, when they had edited pain from their biology. The Biological Codex of Era 7, Revision 482, had categorized it as obsolete evolutionary response, and excised it from their genetic lineage with the precision of a surgeon removing a tumor. "Do you feel pain on purpose?" Karen asked, his voice carrying the clinical detachment of someone examining a particularly unusual insect. Elaine's smile widened, though her eyes carried shadows that spoke of weeks in captivity. "No, General. Pain finds us. Purpose is what we choose to do with it." The answer made no sense. Karen's 6 eyes narrowed, their crystalline surfaces reflecting the blue-white light of the laboratory. Behind him, holographic displays tracked Elaine's biometrics in real time. Heart rate elevated but steady, cortisol levels indicating stress but not panic. Neural activity showing patterns that his scientists had been studying obsessively since her capture. The war had ended 3 months ago. Humanity had lost, their small fleet no match for the Dravari Empire's perfected military machine. But winning the war had been easy. Understanding the prisoners was proving impossible. "You refused anesthetic during your interrogation," Karen continued, circling her slowly. His footsteps made no sound on the pristine white floor. "Dr. Velkar's report indicates you experienced pain levels that would have caused immediate unconsciousness in any known species. Yet you remained conscious, aware. You spoke to us while your body should have been shutting down." Elaine's jaw tightened. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Not fear. Something deeper. "Your doctor is thorough," she said quietly. "He is confused," Karen corrected. "We all are. Your species appears to have evolved backward. You retain biological responses that serve no survival function. Pain is obsolete. It provides no advantage. It only causes suffering." "Does it?" Elaine met his gaze directly, and Karen felt that uncomfortable sensation intensify. In his culture, such direct eye contact from a prisoner would be considered aggressive. But in her eyes, he saw something else. Challenge. Not of violence, but of understanding. Karen gestured to a chair. Sit. You are clearly in discomfort. I can stand. That is not a request. Elaine sat, but the movement was controlled, deliberate. Even in captivity, even wounded, she maintained agency over her own body. Karen had observed this in all the human prisoners. They refused to surrender control, even when logic dictated submission. He brought up a holographic display, rotating it so she could see. Brain scans. Her brain scans. The images showed something that had sent ripples of shock through the Dravari scientific community when they had first been analyzed. Do you know what this is? Karen asked. Elaine studied the images. My brain. Before and after your interrogation sessions. Yes. And do you see the difference? She was silent for a moment, her eyes tracking the colored regions that lit up across the scans like constellations. More connections, she said finally. New neural pathways. 2.7 million new synaptic connections, Karen said. And he could not keep a note of wonder from his voice. Formed during and immediately after each pain episode. Your brain does not shut down under duress. It grows. It adapts. The pain you experience is not destroying you, Captain Harper. It is literally making you stronger. Dr. Velkar had theorized that pain might be a catalyst for human neural evolution, rather than a flaw. The data supported it. Every human prisoner they studied showed similar patterns. But that raised a question that had been keeping the Dravari Scientific Council awake during their rest cycles. An impossibility in itself, since they had eliminated insomnia 40,000 years ago. If humans can grow through pain, Karen said slowly. What did my species lose when we eliminated it? Elaine looked at him for a long moment. The white laboratory light cast sharp shadows across her face, highlighting the exhaustion, the pain she was clearly experiencing but refusing to acknowledge. You want an answer I can't give you in words, General. But I can show you something. She held out her hand, palm up. On it was a scar, old and faded, running across her palm in a jagged line. I was 7 years old, tried to catch a falling kitchen knife. Stupid kid mistake. My mother rushed me to the hospital, held my hand the whole way while I screamed. The pain was terrible. But you know what I remember most? Karen waited. Her face. The way she looked at me. Like my pain hurt her more than it hurt me. She felt what I felt, even though she wasn't wounded. That's when I first understood that pain connects us. It makes us remember. It makes us human. Karen processed this. The Dravari had eliminated empathy pain responses along with physical pain, considering them redundant emotional loops that served no function. But looking at Elaine now, at the way she touched that old scar with something approaching reverence, he wondered if his people had missed something fundamental. The holographic displays flickered. Dr. Velkar's face appeared, his expression carrying what passed for urgency and Dravari features. General, the Council requests your presence. There has been a development regarding the human prisoners. Karen nodded. Dismissed. He turned back to Elaine. You will remain here under observation. Dr. Velkar will continue his research. Research, Elaine repeated. And for the first time, her smile disappeared entirely. That's what you call torture now? We offered you relief from pain. You refused. Because I wanted to prove something to you. Her voice was hard now, and Karen heard the anger beneath it. I wanted you to see that we don't break. That pain doesn't make us weak. And has it made you strong, Captain? Or has it simply made you suffer for no reason? The question hung in the air between them. Elaine looked away first, and Karen caught something in her expression. Doubt. The first crack in her armor. He left her there in the white cathedral, suspended over the electric ocean, alone with her pain and her pride. As the doors sealed behind him, Karen accessed the Dravari Imperial database, pulling up comparative data that had been troubling him since the war began. Technological innovation rate, human civilization, last 500 years, 420% increase. Technological innovation rate, Dravari civilization, same period, 0.03% increase. The numbers were undeniable. Humanity had gone from primitive chemical rockets to faster-than-light travel in less time than it took a single Dravari to reach middle age. Societies that maintained controlled exposure to adversity, including pain, showed adaptability 89 times greater than those that eliminated it. The correlation was there, but correlation was not causation. And Karen had built his entire career on the principle that perfection required the elimination of all inefficiency. Pain was inefficient. Pain served no purpose. Then why did the human brain rewire itself specifically to handle more of it? Karen reached his command chamber, a sphere of transparent crystal offering a 360-degree view of Virex Prime's capital city. Spires of white and silver stretched toward the sky, perfect geometries unmarred by chaos or conflict. 40,000 years of peace, 40,000 years of stability, 40,000 years of nothing new. The thought arrived unbidden, and Karen pushed it away. But it returned, persistent as radiation. In their quest for perfection, had the Dravari eliminated the very thing that made growth possible? Behind him, the laboratory monitoring system sent an alert. Captain Harper's biometrics showed elevated stress responses, heart rate climbing, breathing irregular. For a moment, Karen considered ordering medical intervention. Then he remembered her words. Pain finds us. Purpose is what we choose to do with it. He left the alert unanswered and wondered what purpose Elaine Harper would find in her suffering, and whether, in observing her, he might finally understand the question that had begun to haunt him. What had his perfect species forgotten how to feel? The cell was not cruel by Dravari standards. White walls, clean air, temperature regulated to human comfort levels. A sleeping platform. Access to water and nutritional compounds that met all biological requirements. By the standards of imprisonment across 10,000 known species, it was humane. By human standards, it was crushing isolation. Elaine sat on the sleeping platform, her back against the wall, and tried not to think about Sophie. She failed. She had been failing at this for 73 days. 73 days since the USS Kepler had taken catastrophic damage during the ambush in the Tertius system. 73 days since she had made the choice that still woke her in the night, gasping. The medical bay had been flooding with wounded. 14 personnel needing immediate intervention. 8 more with critical injuries that could wait minutes, maybe 5, before becoming fatal. She had been the ranking medical officer. The choice had been hers. She remembered their names, all 8 of them. Lieutenant Chen, who had twin daughters back on Mars Station. Engineer Prakash, who played guitar during off hours and dreamed of opening a music school. Private Kowalski, barely 20 years old, who still sent messages home to his mother every week. She had saved 14. The 8 had died waiting. The mathematics were sound. The logic was unassailable. But logic did not stop her from seeing their faces when she closed her eyes. Did not stop the guilt that sat like a stone in her chest, cold and permanent. The door opened. Dr. Velkar entered, accompanied by 2 assistants carrying equipment. The Dravari scientist was tall even by his species' standards, his 4 arms moving with a precision that spoke of centuries of practice. He had lived for 317 years. Elaine was 38. The age difference should have made her feel insignificant. Instead, it made her wonder what he had done with all that time. Captain Harper, Velkar said in his careful, measured voice. We will conduct another neurological scan. The General wishes to understand the mechanism behind your neural plasticity response. You mean he wants to know why pain makes us smarter? Elaine said flatly. Smarter is imprecise, more adaptive. Your brain generates new pathways in response to stress stimuli. It is unlike anything in our medical databases. The equipment was set up around her, electrodes attached to her temples, a scanner that hummed with frequencies just at the edge of her hearing. Velkar studied his displays with the intensity of someone genuinely curious. Not malicious, not even particularly cold. Just scientific. That somehow made it worse. Tell me, Captain, Velkar said as the scan initiated. Why did you refuse anesthetic during previous examinations? Surely you understand we were not attempting to cause suffering. We offered relief. You declined. The logic escapes me. Elaine stared at the white ceiling. I wanted you to see what we can endure. But why? What purpose does endurance serve when relief is available? Because sometimes the pain is the point. The words came out harder than she intended. Because I needed to prove, to myself, if to no one else, that you couldn't break me. That I was still in control of something. Even if that something was just choosing to hurt. Velkar's crystalline eyes reflected the scanner light. That is not rational. No, Elaine agreed. It's human. The scan completed. Velkar studied the results, his 4 hands moving across holographic data streams. His expression, as much as she could read Dravari features, showed something approaching confusion. Your neuroplasticity exceeds predictions by 47%. The pain response is triggering growth cascades throughout your prefrontal cortex and hippocampus. You are literally reorganizing your brain architecture in real time. Is that supposed to make me feel better about being your lab rat? It should make you curious, Velkar said, and for the first time, she heard something in his voice that was not pure clinical detachment. The Dravari eliminated pain 43,000 years ago, after what we call the Great Plague of Suffering. 40% of our population died in agony before we developed the cure. The decision to remove pain from our biology was an act of mercy. It has given us 40 millennia of peace, 40 millennia of stagnation, Elaine said quietly. Velkar's hands stilled over the holographic displays. What did you say? Your technological innovation rate. The general mentioned it. 0.03% growth over 500 years. You perfected yourselves into a corner. No pain, no pressure, no reason to change. You became static. We became peaceful, Velkar corrected, but his voice lacked conviction. There is value in stability. There is. But there's also a cost. Elaine met his eyes. When was the last time you felt strongly about anything, Doctor? When was the last time you made art, or wrote poetry, or did something just because it moved you? Not because it was efficient. Not because it served a function. Just because you felt it mattered? The silence stretched between them. Finally, Velkar said, We have cultural output, architectural designs, mathematical proofs. Efficiency reports. That's not art, that's documentation. Velkar packed up his equipment without another word, but before he left, he turned back. The general asked me a question today. If humans grow through pain, what did we lose when we eliminated it? I told him nothing. That pain is vestigial, purposeless. But you have made me uncertain of that answer. When he left, Elaine was alone again. The white walls seemed to press closer. She thought of Sophie, 9 years old the last time they had spoken before Elaine shipped out. 9 years old and angry that Mommy was leaving again. Their last conversation had been a fight about presence, about priorities, about how Elaine always chose duty over family. Sophie would be 10 now. 10 years old and probably believing her mother was dead. The Dravari had not permitted communications with Earth. For all Sophie knew, the USS Kepler had simply vanished into the black, taking her mother with it. The tears came before Elaine could stop them. Hot, bitter, silent. She buried her face in her hands and whispered the words that had become her evening prayer in this white hell. I'm sorry, Sophie. I'm so sorry. The pain in her chest was worse than any wound Velkar had studied. It was the pain of absence, of choice, of love that could not cross the light years between mother and daughter. The Dravari could catalog her neural responses and measure her stress hormones, but they could not quantify this. They had eliminated their capacity for it along with all other suffering. She wondered if that made them lucky or cursed. 3 days later, Karen returned to the laboratory. Elaine had been expecting another interrogation, more questions about human physiology and psychology. Instead, He brought a simple request. "Tell me about phantom limb pain," he said. The question caught her off guard. "What?" "I have been reading human medical journals. There is a phenomenon where individuals who lose limbs continue to feel pain in the absent appendage. Pain from something that no longer exists. I do not understand the mechanism, or the purpose." Elaine sat across from him in the white cathedral. Her leg still ached from the injury 3 days prior, but the pain was manageable now. Her body was adapting. That was what human bodies did. "The nerves remember," she explained. "The brain has a map of your body. When you lose a part of that body, the map doesn't update immediately. So you still feel it. Still feel pain where there should be nothing. That is inefficient. That is memory," Elaine corrected. "The body remembering what it lost. Pain as a record of absence." Karen was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than she had heard it before. "My species has lost much over our history. Worlds destroyed, populations relocated, entire cultures absorbed into the greater empire. But we do not feel phantom pain for what is gone. We simply acknowledge the loss and continue." "And you wonder why nothing new grows," Elaine said. "Because growth requires remembering what came before, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts." Karen looked out the window at Virex Prime's perfect spires. "We have achieved peace that spans 40,000 years. Surely that is worth the cost of some discomfort." "Peace is worth everything," Elaine agreed. "But if you paid for it by forgetting how to feel, then you didn't win peace. You just made a comfortable grave." The words hung between them. Karen stood abruptly. "You will be transferred to a more comfortable facility. Dr. Velkar's experiments are concluded for now. The General Council wishes to study you further, but they have agreed to improved conditions." "Why?" "Because you have made us ask questions we have not asked in 40,000 years, and I am beginning to suspect that questions are more valuable than answers." After he left, Elaine touched the scar on her palm, the old wound from childhood, the knife she had tried to catch, her mother's face, wet with tears, holding her hand in the emergency room. The pain then had been sharp, immediate, terrible, and yet she would not trade the memory of her mother's love, even if it came wrapped in pain. The Dravari had eliminated suffering, but they had also eliminated the possibility of that love, that connection, that human thing that made pain meaningful. For the first time since her capture, Elaine wondered if her captors were the ones truly imprisoned, and whether, in showing them what pain meant, she might somehow break them free. Dr. Sivan had studied 10,000 species across 2 centuries of xenobiology research. She had cataloged the mating rituals of the hexapod colonies, documented the metamorphosis cycles of the chrysalis collective, and written the definitive text on non-carbon-based consciousness. In all that time, across all those species, she had never encountered anything that made her question the fundamental tenets of Dravari philosophy. Until the humans. She stood in the observation deck overlooking Elaine Harper's new facility, a space that was marginally less sterile than the cell, but still felt like a cage dressed in white. General Karen had insisted on the upgrade after his last conversation with the human. Sivan had argued against it. Comfort bred complacency. If they wanted to understand human resilience, they needed to observe it under stress. Karen had overruled her. She suspected it was not out of mercy, but out of curiosity. The general was changing. She had noticed it in the way he lingered over reports about human psychology, the way he asked questions that had no clear scientific purpose. Questions about meaning, about purpose, about why a species would choose to suffer. It concerned her. But she was a scientist, and concern was simply data waiting to be analyzed. "Begin the pain threshold test," Sivan ordered to her assistant. In the facility below, Elaine was seated in a chair, electrodes attached to monitor her responses. The test was simple. Controlled electrical stimulation gradually increasing in intensity. The goal was to establish the point at which she would request cessation. Every other species they had tested reached that point within 30 seconds. Humans were different. Elaine's jaw tightened as the stimulation began. Her fists clenched, sweat beaded on her forehead. The monitor showed her pain response activating, neural pathways lighting up like stars being born. And still she did not ask them to stop. 2 minutes. 3. Her breathing turned ragged. Her body began to shake. Subject is approaching critical stress levels, the assistant reported. Continue, Sivan said. She needed to know where the breaking point was, needed to understand the mechanism that allowed humans to endure what should be unendurable. 4 minutes. Elaine's eyes squeezed shut. A sound escaped her throat, low and animal. Not quite a scream, not quite a moan. Something in between that spoke of edges being reached. Subject's cortisol levels are exceeding safe parameters. Continue. 5 minutes. And then Elaine's voice, cracked and desperate. Stop. Please. Stop. Sivan gave the order. The stimulation ceased. In the facility, Elaine slumped in the chair, chest heaving, tears streaming down her face. Not from the pain itself, Sivan realized, but from something deeper. Shame. Failure. The belief that she had broken. The data was extraordinary. 5 minutes of sustained pain before reaching the breaking point. The human brain had generated 3.4 million new neural connections during the test. The adaptive response was beyond anything in the literature. But as Sivan watched Elaine curl into herself, shaking, she felt something uncomfortable twist in her chest. Something that had no name in Dravari language, because they had eliminated it along with physical pain. Guilt. The word came from the human psychological database she had been studying. The distress that comes from believing you have caused harm. The Dravari had edited guilt from their emotional range 40,000 years ago, categorizing it as a maladaptive response that served no evolutionary function. So why did Sivan feel it now? She left the observation deck and made her way to the environmental control station. The day had been long, and she needed to check the atmospheric regulators before her rest cycle. Routine work. Familiar. Safe. The control panel was malfunctioning, displaying error codes. Sivan reached to input the override sequence, her attention focused on the holographic display. She did not notice that the panel's cooling system had failed until her hand pressed against the metal surface. Heat. Sudden. Shocking. Burning. Pain. For the first time in 203 years, Dr. Sivan felt physical pain. Her genetic modifications had failed. A 0.001% failure rate that no one had warned her was possible. The heat receptors that should have been dormant activated. The pain signals that should have been blocked transmitted. And Sivan felt. It was not intense. By human standards, it was probably minor. A brief contact with a hot surface. The kind of thing that happened in kitchens across 1 billion worlds every day. But for Sivan, who had not felt physical sensation since childhood, it was overwhelming. The pain bloomed across her palm. Sharp. Immediate. Impossible to ignore. Her carefully controlled Dravari composure shattered. She pulled her hand back, staring at the reddened skin, and something broke inside her. She cried. Not the controlled release of excess ocular fluid that Dravari sometimes experience during allergic reactions. Real crying, sobbing. The kind of crying that shook her entire body and made her sink to the floor, clutching her burned hand to her chest. And with the crying came memory. She remembered being young, remembered before the genetic modifications fully activated, remembered her mother, whose name she had not thought of in a century, holding her after she fell and scraped her knee. Remembered the pain, yes, but also the comfort, the presence, the love that came in response to hurt. When had she last felt anything so strongly? When had she last felt anything at all? The door opened. Karen entered, alerted by the environmental system's emergency notification. He found Sivan on the floor, still crying, staring at her reddened palm with an expression he had never seen on a Dravari face before. Wonder. My modification failed, Savin whispered. I touched the panel. It burned, and I remembered what it was to feel something real. Karen knelt beside her. For a moment, he seemed at a loss. Then he did something unprecedented. He touched her shoulder, a gesture of comfort that had no place in Dravari culture, where physical contact served only functional purposes. The human is changing us, Savin said. Her pain is making us ask if our perfection is just another word for emptiness. Karen was silent. Finally, he said, The council convenes tomorrow. They have reviewed Dr. Velkar's findings. There is talk of a project, an experimental reversal of our pain elimination modifications. Voluntary, of course, to study whether humans are correct, whether pain serves a purpose we have forgotten. What will you recommend? I do not know, but I think of Elaine Harper, enduring 5 minutes of stimulation before she broke. And then I think of my species, which would have stopped at 30 seconds. We are efficient. We are comfortable. But are we alive the way she is alive? Are we feeling the way she feels? Sivin looked at her burned palm. The pain was fading now, her body's natural healing already activating. Soon it would be gone entirely, leaving only memory. I want to volunteer, she said, for the project. Whatever it is, I want to feel again, even if it hurts. Especially if it hurts. You may regret that choice. Perhaps. But I think I have been regretting the absence of choice for 200 years without knowing it. The council meeting happened in a chamber carved from crystal, floating in the upper atmosphere of Virex Prime. 50 members of the Dravari scientific elite gathered to debate a proposal that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. Project Sentier, named after the human word for feeling. A voluntary genetic restoration program that would reverse the pain elimination modifications. Return the Dravari to a state of biological vulnerability they had not experienced in 43 millennia. The opposition was fierce. This is regression, Council member Zervoth declared. We spent centuries achieving biological perfection. Now we propose to undo it because one primitive species endures suffering? This is madness. It is curiosity, Karen countered. We have observed that human innovation rates exceed ours by factors we cannot explain through conventional analysis. Their ability to adapt to new challenges is unprecedented. The correlation with their pain response is undeniable. Correlation is not causation. No. But it is a question worth asking. What if pain is not obsolete? What if we eliminated something essential when we eliminated suffering? The debate raged for hours. The conservative faction argued persuasively. Restoring pain could cause societal instability, psychological damage. Even suicides, as individuals discovered they could not cope with sensations their ancestors had edited away. Was it ethical to risk billions for an experiment inspired by a species that had lost a war? The progressive faction, led by Karen, argued differently. Without risk, there was no growth. Without pain, there was no pressure to change. The Dravari had achieved peace, yes, but they had also achieved stagnation. Their last major scientific breakthrough had been 3,000 years ago. They had stopped growing because they had eliminated the very thing that made growth necessary. The vote was close. 48-2. Project Sentier was approved, but only as a voluntary program. Those who wished to remain in their perfected state were free to do so. Those who wished to reclaim pain could volunteer. 60% of the population rejected the idea immediately. 30% were uncertain. Only 10% expressed immediate interest in volunteering. But 10% of 2.7 billion citizens was still 270 million Dravari willing to risk suffering for the possibility of feeling truly alive again. In her facility, Elaine knew none of this. She only knew that the tests continued, each one pushing her closer to edges she did not want to reach. The pain was manageable. The loneliness was not. At night, alone in the white room, she thought about Sophie, wondered if her daughter remembered her face, wondered if the girl hated her for leaving, wondered if she would ever get the chance to explain that duty and love could coexist. even when they pulled in opposite directions. She touched the old scar on her palm, the knife she had tried to catch at 7 years old, her mother's face, the way love and pain had intertwined into a memory that defined her understanding of what it meant to care about someone. The Dravari had eliminated that possibility from their biology, and in doing so, they had eliminated something essential, something that made suffering meaningful, something that made existence more than just continuation. Elaine wondered if they could ever understand that, and if understanding it would destroy them or save them. In the crystal chamber, as the council adjourned, Karen looked out at Virex Prime's perfect cityscape. 40,000 years of peace stretched behind him. Before him, he saw 2 possible futures. One where his people remained as they were, comfortable and static. Another where they reclaimed pain and risked everything they had built for the possibility of growth. Both futures terrified him, but only one of them felt alive. The solar monitoring station detected the flare 17 minutes before it struck. 17 minutes to sound alarms, activate magnetic shielding, evacuate exposed areas. By Dravari standards of efficiency, it should have been more than enough time. But the flare was Class 9 radiation, beyond anything Virex Prime systems were designed to handle. And the Dravari had not needed to evacuate in the face of danger for 40,000 years. They had forgotten how to panic. They had forgotten how to run. In the command center, Karen watched the shielding fail with something approaching disbelief. The magnetic fields that should have deflected the solar storm simply collapsed under the intensity. Radiation began pouring into the city like poison light. The first Dravari to experience it collapsed immediately, not from the radiation itself, but from their body's complete inability to process what was happening. Their nervous systems, perfected to eliminate all discomfort, could not interpret the sensation of burning. The signals reached their brains and found no pathways to process them. Paralysis, confusion, terror without understanding. Karen felt the heat through his environmental suit, and for the first time in 400 years, felt something close to physical fear, not pain. His modifications prevented that, but the knowledge that his body was being damaged without his awareness, that he was burning and could not feel it until the damage was already catastrophic. He activated the facility cameras, searching for casualties, for damage reports, for any information that would help coordinate a response. And then he saw something that made his logical mind halt entirely. Elaine Harper was still in the detention wing. The area had been forgotten during the evacuation protocols. She was trapped in her cell, radiation pouring through the walls as the shielding failed, and there was no one coming to save her. Karen's fingers moved across the console to open emergency protocols. But then he stopped, because Elaine was not dying. She was moving. The cell door had been damaged in the initial strike, hanging half open, and Cross, one of the guards, had collapsed in the doorway, his keycard fallen from trembling hands. Through the camera, Karen watched Elaine make a choice. She grabbed the keycard, unlocked her restraints. The path to the emergency shelters was clear. 47 seconds until lethal radiation exposure. She could make it if she ran now. Instead, she turned back. She grabbed Cross under the arms and started dragging him toward the corridor. The Dravari soldier was larger than her, heavier, his body dead weight. Elaine's face contorted. Not with effort, with pain. The radiation was burning her. Karen could see it in the way her skin reddened, in the way she moved with the desperate urgency of someone whose body was screaming warnings her mind chose to ignore. And she was screaming. Not words, just sound, raw, visceral. The sound of someone experiencing agony and continuing anyway. Why? Karen whispered to the empty command center. Why would you go back? His logical mind provided no answer. Every calculation said she should run. Save herself. Let the guard die. It was the efficient choice, the survival choice, the only choice that made sense. But Elaine Harper had never made sense. She dragged Cross into the corridor. Then she turned and went back into the radiation. There was another Dravari there, collapsed. She grabbed them too, started dragging. Her movements were slower now, more labored. The radiation was cooking her from the inside out, but she kept moving. 3 Dravari. 4. 5. Karen watched her pull a 6th into relative safety, and he realized something that shook him to his core. She was not going to stop. She was going to keep going back until the radiation killed her, or there was no one left to save. It made no sense. It defied all logic. It was completely, utterly, impossibly human. And Karen found himself running toward the detention wing. He did not make the decision consciously. One moment he was in the command center. The next he was in the corridors, overriding security protocols, heading toward certain danger with no rational explanation for why. He found Elaine dragging her 13th rescue toward the emergency shelter. She was barely standing. Her left hand hung limp, nerves clearly damaged. Blood ran from her nose. Her eyes were red from radiation exposure. But when she saw Karen, she smiled that impossible human smile. "General," she gasped, "what are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same question. Finishing what I started." She turned back toward the radiation. "There are more." Karen grabbed her arm. "You will die." "Yeah, probably." She pulled free. "But I'll die doing something that matters. You taught me that. In your laboratory. When you showed me my brain growing through pain. You showed me that suffering is only pointless if we waste it." She stumbled back toward the radiation zone. And Karen, against every instinct his species had cultivated over 40 millennia, followed her. "What are you doing?" Elaine shouted. "Learning." They found 2 more Dravari in the next chamber. Karen took one, Elaine the other. The heat was intense now, even through his environmental suit. And then Karen felt something he had not felt since he was an infant, before his pain modifications had fully activated. Heat. Real heat. His genetic modifications were failing under the extreme radiation. The safeguards that protected him from discomfort were breaking down. And for the first time in 400 years, Karen felt pain. It was terrible. It was overwhelming. It was burning that consumed thought and replaced it with pure, desperate need to make it stop. And yet he did not stop. Elaine looked at him, saw something in his expression. "You feel it now, don't you? The pain." "Yes." The word came out as a gasp. "Welcome to being alive." She grinned even as blood ran down her chin. "Keep moving. That's the human trick. Keep moving until you can't." They dragged another 4 Dravari to safety. Karen's hands were shaking. His perfect Dravari composure had shattered. He wanted to collapse. Wanted to stop. Wanted relief from this sensation that his body was not designed to handle. But Elaine kept moving. So he kept moving. When they finally stumbled into the emergency shelter, the count was 47. 47 Dravari who would have died without intervention. 47 lives saved by a human who had every reason to let them burn. Elaine collapsed against the wall. Karen saw the damage. Her left hand was not responding. Burns covered her arms and face. Her breathing was shallow, labored. She had pushed her body past its limits and paid the price. He knelt beside her. His own hands were trembling. Not from damage, though the pain continued to pulse through him, but from something else. Something his species had edited away because they thought it was weakness. Tears. Karen was crying. For the first time in 400 years, he was crying. Not from physical pain, though that was intense, but from something deeper. Gratitude, shame, wonder. Emotions that had no names in Dravari language because they had been deemed inefficient. Elaine's eyes focused on him. "Did we get them all?" 47, Karen said. "You saved 47. Good." She closed her eyes. "That's better than last time. On the Kepler, I only saved 14, lost 8. Their names were..." Her voice trailed off as consciousness left her. Medics arrived. They stabilized Elaine, but the damage was done. Radiation burns, nerve damage in her left hand, partial hearing loss in her left ear, damage that would never fully heal. She would carry the scars of this choice for the rest of her life. And Karen understood finally what purpose pain served. It was memory. It was the price of love. It was what made sacrifice meaningful instead of simply wasteful. Elaine had chosen to hurt because the alternative was letting others die. She had chosen connection over safety, empathy over survival. And in that choice, she had shown the Dravari what 40,000 years of perfection had cost them. The ability to care more about others than themselves. The capacity to suffer for a purpose greater than comfort. In the days that followed, as Elaine recovered in the medical facility, Karen reviewed the footage of the rescue dozens of times. Each time, he tried to find the logic in her actions, the calculation that made her choice rational. He never found it, because it was not logic. It was something his species had eliminated because they could not quantify it, could not measure it, could not perfect it. It was the human capacity to choose what mattered over what was easy, to feel pain and call it purpose, to burn and call it meaningful. The radiation had killed 37 Dravari who could not process the pain signals in time to seek shelter. But 47 lived who should have died. And every one of them lived because a human prisoner had chosen to endure agony for the sake of beings who had held her captive. Karen accessed the Project Sentier volunteer database. He added his name to the list. If this was what it meant to feel truly alive, then 40,000 years of comfortable existence seemed suddenly, utterly empty. Dr. Sivan had been right. Pain was not the enemy. The absence of everything worth suffering for was. Elaine woke to white light and the smell of antiseptic. For a moment, she thought she was back on the USS Kepler, in medical bay before everything went wrong. Then she tried to move her left hand and remembered. The hand responded, but wrong. Numb in places. Hypersensitive in others. The nerves had been damaged by radiation, and while Dravari medical technology could repair much, it could not undo everything. She would live with this. A permanent reminder of the choice she made. Phantom pain, she thought. Just like we talked about, General. Pain from something that is not quite there anymore. Karen sat beside her bed. He looked different. Older somehow, though Dravari aged slowly. Then Elaine realized it was not age. It was something in his eyes. Weight. The weight that came from feeling things you had never felt before. You stayed, Elaine said, her voice rough. I did. The medics said you would wake soon. I wanted to be here when you did. How long? 4 days since the solar storm. You have been unconscious for most of it. The radiation damage was extensive. Karen paused. You will recover, but not fully. The nerve damage to your hand is permanent. Your hearing in your left ear is reduced by 42%, and there will be pain. Chronic pain that our medicine cannot eliminate without your consent. I don't want it eliminated. Elaine flexed her damaged hand. This is the price I paid. I want to remember that it mattered. Karen nodded slowly. I understand now. What you tried to explain in the laboratory. Pain is not the enemy. Meaningless pain is the enemy. You transformed your suffering into purpose. And in doing so, you changed us. Changed you? The Council has approved Project Sentier. Full implementation. Any Dravari who wishes to restore their pain receptors may volunteer. The genetic modifications can be reversed. We can feel again. He looked at his hands. I have volunteered. So has Dr. Sivan. So have 270 million others. Elaine's eyes widened. That's 10% of your population. It is a beginning. Not everyone agrees. 60% have rejected the program outright. They believe we are regressing, undoing 40,000 years of progress for a romantic notion inspired by primitive biology. Karen's voice held no judgment. They may be right. There have already been complications. 3 Dravari who underwent the restoration experienced pain for the first time in their lives and could not cope. They chose to end their existence rather than continue feeling. I'm sorry. Do not be. They were warned. They chose to risk. And for everyone who cannot adapt, there are thousands who are reporting something they describe as being more alive than they have been in centuries. Dr. Sivan says she cries now, over art, over music, over sunsets. She says it is wonderful and terrible simultaneously. That sounds about right. Elaine managed a weak smile. Welcome to the human condition. Your people are being released. All human prisoners of war. The council voted unanimously. You will be transported back to Earth within the month. The news should have filled Elaine with joy. Instead, she felt a strange emptiness. What will you do? Your empire is divided now. 10% choosing to feel. 90% choosing comfort. That's a recipe for conflict. Perhaps. Or perhaps it is a recipe for diversity. For 2 philosophies coexisting. The sentience and the perfect. We do not yet know if we can live together peacefully. But we are trying. That is new for us. Trying without knowing the outcome. Accepting uncertainty. That is what you taught us. A Dravari attendant entered, carrying a small package. This arrived through the diplomatic channels, Captain Harper. A transmission from Earth. It was flagged as priority. Elaine took the package with her functional hand. Her heart hammered as she recognized the handwriting on the envelope inside. Sophie. Her daughter's handwriting. Older now. More mature. 10 years old. Not 9 anymore. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter and a drawing. The drawing showed a stick figure in a medical uniform pulling other stick figures away from red scribbles that Elaine assumed was meant to be fire or radiation. At the top, in careful child's handwriting, "My mom is a hero." The letter was short. "Mom, I saw the video of you on the news. The Dravari released footage of the solar storm rescue. Everyone says you saved aliens who were keeping you prisoner. Dad said that is what you do. You save people even when it is hard. I was angry at you for leaving. But I understand now. You did not leave because you did not love me. You left because you love everyone. I am proud of you. Come home. Love, Sophie." Elaine pressed the letter to her chest and cried. Not from pain, from relief, from love, from the knowledge that her daughter understood, even if that understanding was imperfect, even if their relationship would take years to fully repair. Karen stood to leave, giving her privacy. But Elaine called out, "General, what you said in the laboratory, about phantom pain, about feeling what is no longer there. I think I understand it better now." "How so?" "My hand will always hurt. The nerves are damaged, but the pain reminds me of what I saved, who I saved. If I could go back and choose not to feel it, I would not, because the pain is proof that it mattered. Then you and I have learned the same lesson." Karen touched his chest where his heart would be if Dravari anatomy matched human. "I felt pain during the rescue, for the first time in 4 centuries. It was terrible. But when it was over, when I saw those 47 lives we saved, the pain became something else. It became evidence, proof that I had done something worth suffering for. That's the human trick," Elaine said. "We don't avoid pain. We find reasons to make it meaningful." Karen left her then. Outside her window, Virex Prime's spires gleamed in the alien sun. The city looked the same, but Elaine knew it was changing. Slowly, imperfectly. Some Dravari choosing to feel, others choosing comfort. Both choices valid, both choices creating new futures. 10 years later, Elaine stood in the Harper Fellowship Hall, a structure built jointly by human and Dravari architects on Virex Prime. She was 48 now. Her left hand still hurt every morning. Her hearing loss remained. But she had adapted. That was what humans did. They adapted. The fellowship was a research program dedicated to studying what the Dravari now called constructive suffering. Not torture, not meaningless pain, but the kind of adversity that catalyzed growth, the kind of pain that built empathy, the kind of sacrifice that made existence meaningful instead of just extended. 30% of the Dravari population now lived with restored pain receptors. Not a majority, but a significant minority that was already transforming their civilization. Art had exploded. Music filled cities that had been silent for millennia. Dravari were writing poetry again, falling in love again, feeling the full spectrum of existence, beautiful and terrible. The other 70% remained in their perfected state. And that was fine. Both groups coexisted, sometimes uneasily, but without violence. The empire had split philosophically, but not geographically. They were learning to live with disagreement, with uncertainty, with questions that had no perfect answers. Karen had aged more than she had. 200 years of feeling every emotion his species had eliminated had taken a toll. But when he smiled at her across the fellowship hall, she saw something in him that had not been there before. Life. Real life. Messy and painful and wonderful. "Thank you for coming, Captain Harper," he said. "Your daughter as well." Sophie stood beside Elaine, 19 now, a medical student studying xenobiology. Their relationship had healed slowly, imperfectly. There were still wounds, still moments of distance. But they had learned to exist in the space between perfect reconciliation and permanent estrangement. That space, Elaine had learned, was where most love actually lived. "I would not miss this," Elaine said. "What you have built here. It matters. It is not what I built. It is what you inspired. By showing us that pain is not the enemy. Stagnation is the enemy. Comfort without purpose is the enemy. You gave us back the possibility of growth." Later, as Elaine prepared to return to Earth, she stood one last time in the white cathedral where Karen had first asked his question. "Do you feel pain on purpose?" "No," she thought. "But I choose what to do with it. That is the purpose." Her hand throbbed. It always would. The price of saving 47 lives. The price of teaching an empire that perfection was not the same as being truly alive. Worth it, she thought. Every second of agony. Worth it. On Earth, in the medical bay, where she would continue her work, Elaine kept a small plaque on her desk. It bore a quote that had become famous across both species, translated into 100 languages, studied by philosophers and scientists alike. "Pain teaches what fear tries to hide. The body breaks, but the spirit learns." And beneath it, in smaller letters, the words that had become the motto of the Harper Fellowship: "Change hurts, but pain without change is waste." Sophie asked her once what it meant. Elaine had smiled and shown her daughter the scar on her palm. The old wound from childhood. The knife she tried to catch at 7 years old. "It means we do not avoid suffering," Elaine explained. "We make it meaningful. That is what separates existence from life. The willingness to hurt for something that matters. The courage to feel everything, even when it would be easier to feel nothing. Is that what makes us human?" Elaine looked at her damaged hand. Thought of Karen crying for the first time in 4 centuries. Thought of Dr. Sivan weeping over a sunset. Thought of 270 million Dravari choosing to risk pain for the possibility of truly living. "I think," she said slowly, "it is what makes anyone, human or not, truly alive. The Dravari taught me that. They showed me that the capacity to suffer for purpose is not unique to humanity. It is the one thing that might be universal across every species capable of asking why. Pain itself is biological. But choosing to make it meaningful, that is something more. That is what it means to have a soul." Sophie considered this. Then she took her mother's scarred hand in her own. "Does it still hurt? Every day. Do you regret it?" Elaine looked out at the stars, thinking of an empire transformed, a philosophy reborn, and 47 lives that would have ended if she had chosen the easy path. Not for a second. And in that moment, Elaine Harper understood the final truth about pain. It was not the enemy. It was not even the teacher. It was simply evidence. Proof that you had lived, that you had felt, that you had chosen to be present for every second of existence, beautiful and terrible, rather than drifting through a comfortable simulation of life. The Dravari had achieved perfection by eliminating suffering. But they had learned, through one stubborn human's example, that perfection without purpose was just another word for death. True life required the possibility of pain, and the courage to make that pain mean something. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not strength, not technology, not even resilience, but the radical notion that suffering could be transformed into purpose, that pain could be the price of love, and that being truly alive was worth every scar it cost. It was a gift the Dravari were still learning to accept, a gift that would take generations to fully understand. But it was a beginning, and sometimes, the beginning of transformation was the only ending that mattered. Maybe pain was never a flaw in our design, but the language through which life teaches meaning. The Dravari learned what every species must eventually face. Comfort can preserve existence, but only pain can awaken purpose. So perhaps that's the secret humanity carried all along, the courage to suffer for something greater than survival. What about you? What pain in your life has changed the way you see the world? Would you choose a life without suffering, if it also meant never feeling love that deeply again? Do you think perfection without emotion is still life? Or just silence that forgot how to dream? If you understood what this story meant, write the word pain in the comments to show you stayed until the end. Tell me, from which city or planet are you watching? Subscribe if you believe stories like this remind us what we're still capable of. Like, share, and watch the next tale, because somewhere among the stars, someone else is still learning what it means to be alive.